See, it's important for Americans to realize, and even people around the world, that the United States is not against reparations. It's only against reparations for black people. We've seen is that in 1860, black people's physical bodies was worth $3 billion. In that time, that was more than railroads and also factories put together.
A sleepy suburb outside Chicago is the new battleground for reparations in America. There's been a lawsuit that's been filed by a right-wing legal group that wants to kill the program in Evanston, Illinois. The reparations program gives out $25,000 to black people who are direct descendants of Evanston residents from 1919 to 1969 and living in the city today. It was celebrated when Evanston introduced this back in 2021, but Judicial Watch wants to end the program, saying, quote, remedying societal discrimination is not a compelling governmental interest. Basically, it's not Evanston's job to fix America's past. But communities across the country are stepping in to fulfill one of America's broken promises: compensation for centuries of unpaid labor by people against their will, of course, while under the ownership of others. And just this evening, the LA Daily News reported that the LA County voted to explore reparations efforts. Joining me now, Dr. Rashawn Ray, sociology professor at the University of Maryland and vice president of the American Institutes for Research. I always value your intellect on matters like this. You know, this is not the first area, as she mentioned, to have a program that even discussed and evaluated. We saw a map where it's happening all across the country. Why do you think programs like this continue to have the backlash? Is it the nuance of, well, it's not specific enough, or is it broader?
Well, look, I think the backlash is primarily about the group that is going to potentially get some redress or repair, as Robin said, for these particular programs. See, it's important for Americans to realize, and even people around the world, that the United States is not against reparations. It's only against reparations for black people. We've seen reparations for other groups. And one thing that we know historically is that in 1860, black people's physical bodies was worth $3 billion. In that time, that was more than railroads and also factories put together. When we look at Evanston, it's actually a consummate example where you have an incident, redlining. Chicago and the suburbs is one of the classic examples where we see this around the country. And the targeted program is to specifically deal with housing. That is actually what we want. We also have to recognize that this was not that long ago. So part of what we have to look at is there are some people who actually want to roll back time, who actually don't want to see America actually fulfill its values of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
There strikes me a real difficulty of having someone prove discrimination more broadly. We had in the last hour programming with Abby Phillip, she had on an actor who talked about his own experience of having been denied his rental application, even though he certainly met the economic criteria. He certainly was somebody who was well known, and yet it was denied. And he talked about bigotry being real even to this day. And there'll be those who will say anecdotes are not proof of anything. It's difficult to prove discrimination more broadly.
Yeah, but look, the research is very, very clear, particularly in housing. In the state of Maryland, I'm on a state of Maryland task force dealing with appraisals, dealing with home values. We know across the country that if you live in neighborhoods that are predominantly black, holding all else equal, that equals about $50,000 less per home. That is real money. That actually contributes to the wealth gap between blacks and whites, which is oftentimes 10 to 1. That also contributes to what happens in the labor market, what happens in commercial real estate. There is sociological research actually documenting what happens when people enter the labor market, when it comes to whether or not a person is graduating from an Ivy League school or not, whether or not a person has a criminal record. And here goes a key statistic for people when it comes to work and as it relates to housing and what's happening in communities. Research documents that black people without a criminal record are less likely to get hired for a job than white people with a criminal record. That is racism. That is systemic racism. And it happens in housing. When all of a sudden you put up pictures of black people in your home, all of a sudden you're going to get less value for your home. That's why they tell black homeowners to remove their pictures. Everybody knows that.
I was told that exact thing when we were trying to sell one of my houses. It was the idea of, just don't have any evidence, remove black dolls, remove pictures of your family when they have the walkthroughs, any evidence that there might be a person of color living there. That's a very real thing, and people probably are thinking, is that true? Yes. So the reparations program in Evanston, it has drawn hundreds of applications and applicants, and the city has paid out, I understand, nearly $5 million. What kind of impact is this program having on the Black community in Evanston?
Well, it has brought great hope that our city has said we will take our first steps towards repair. We have, as you mentioned, dispersed nearly $5 million, around $4.8 million to our elders and our direct descendants. And it has, first of all, brought tangible repair in the amount of $25,000, which in most cases have had a great value add with additional programs that have been added to the reparations. And it has brought a sense of hope, belief, place, ownership to the Black community that we've been building on. And so we've started with this $20 million commitment in Evanston, and we hope to do more.
Yeah, there has been criticism, though, of the program, as I'm sure you have heard. One has been that, according to Judicial Watch, it's too broad. In the lawsuit, they say, quote, at no point in the application process are persons required to present evidence that they or their ancestors experienced housing discrimination or otherwise suffered harm because of an unlawful Evanston ordinance, policy, or procedure. Now, I know you can't comment on this case specifically, but what do you say to people who believe that the bar is just far too low?
Well, I'll say this. In 2019, when I called the question that led to this, and not just Evanston, now over 100 localities that have taken their step towards reparations, we all knew this day would come. We know that there are other communities that don't believe repair is just. And so we have been well prepared. Our legal department has been well prepared for this day. And as you stated, I'm not able to make comment, but our legal department and other legal professionals across this nation are ready to defend this case.
Because this is not just reparations. Conservatives have been targeting DEI programs across the country, with several states who are trying to address issues, pass legislation in a variety of ways that go to a central theme that the reparations program was looking at. When you see the attack that's happening there, do you see parallels to what's happening right now in Evanston?
Yeah, there's no question. And this really doesn't come as any surprise. We are looking at the Fearless Fund, the attacks on affirmative action and voter rights and so on. So this is in the same vein. I also want to note that Evanston is looking to address its harm in the community. We know that we can't address the institution of slavery, but what we can do and what we're responsible to do and have made a commitment to do is address Evanston's harm, and that specifically has been in the housing space, as was mentioned. And so this does not come as a surprise, and it is an attack on the entire movement. And we are looking to fight this. We will fight it. Other communities will fight it as well.
Well, the struggle will continue on addressing all of these issues and seeing how this definitely will play out in the long run. And I think both of you make such really salient points trying to talk about the context and the nuance of what is really at stake. And the conversation simply, I mean, it could never be held in a vacuum, but really important to consider each jurisdiction trying to find their particular way. Robin Rue Simmons, Dr. Rashawn Ray, thank you both so much.